Hey everyone, I'd like to share what I've come to learn about negative progression. I used to love doing this type of betting in roulette when I first started playing a long time ago. I came up with so many different strategies that involve negative progression, and then I came to realize just what a bad idea that was. So let's go over it. This is kind of a part two, by the way, of another roulette video I made about how to go about testing your favorite strategy or a new strategy that you came up with. And so this video involves some of the math that I refer to in that video. So if you'd like to or are curious about that video and want to know about how to go about testing your strategy, go ahead and click on the link I believe I'm going to put on top here, or go to my main page and you'll find it there. Thank you. So the overview. This is coming from the Fibonacci strategy. This is his real name, Leonardo Bassi. Sorry if I butchered that name. He was a mathematician back in the Middle Ages that came up with this sequence. The strategy involves us betting following this sequence, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, and so on, each time adding the last two numbers. So the next number in the sequence would be an 8, adding the 3 and the 5. This bet is known as the golden entry or the Fibonacci dozen. We're betting on either the dozen or the column because those are the ones that pay 2 to 1. And every time we lose, we're going to increase our bet following the sequence. After we win, usually you start back at the very start of the sequence. There have been a few examples where people's strategy involves taking 2 steps back because that's typically how that's used. However, when it comes to the dozens or the column bets, most strategies involve going back to the start. So that's what we're going to do here until you hit the table limit. Once you hit the table limit, well, that's going to be it. You've lost. The principle that's involved with a lot of the negative progressions is the idea that if you just keep betting long enough, you'll eventually win because the probability of consecutive losses as the losses mount tends to get smaller as time goes on. The nice thing about this strategy in particular is that once you do hit your dozen or your column numbers, you not only get full recovery, that means your bankroll goes right back to where it started, you'll actually end up with some profit on top of that as well. Now, you're gonna have a lot of successes with this strategy, again, because the probability is gonna be pretty high that you'll win versus all the consecutive losses that it would take for you to lose. So you tend to see a lot of success with a negative progression type strategy. Okay. There are some logical fallacies and contradictions we need to go over just to make sure we understand some of the math. One, independent events. So let's say we're flipping a coin 100 times. It can turn up heads 100 times. Okay. If we flip it another 100 times, it does not mean it's going to now turn tails 100 times, right? It could still go heads 100 more times, over and over and over again. Okay. It is not due to hit heads. Okay. Each event was independent from the other. So we're going to take this idea of independent as just a given. It is a fact that all the events in the roulette wheel are independent from each other. Some people refer to a law of averages. This is a misnomer. There is no such thing as a law of averages. By which I mean people think, well, if it's turned up heads 100 times, then it has to turn up tails 100 times some point in the future just to make up and balance itself out. That is not true. There is, though, an actual thing called the law of large numbers. Okay. As we move on through infinity of every possible case that could possibly happen, and we are able to take that back, right, and see all of infinity, it's gonna look pretty close to 50-50 in flipping the coin. It does not have to be exactly 50-50, but it's gonna get pretty close to that. Another misunderstanding when it comes to the probabilities is that we think of the bell curve, right? This nice shape, both sides being equal to each other, when that's not necessarily the case. We're going to take a look at the what the bell curve would look like for the roulette wheel in this case. You're going to see it does not fit the typical bell curve. What we should actually be looking at is the geometric distribution. Okay, there's a reason for that, is because in the bell curve, right, the typical idea of it is that there's negative numbers, but there's no way to have negative spins on a roulette wheel. There's no way to have a negative roll of dice in craps. No way to have any kind of negative number show up in the probabilities on a casino game. Okay, you can have a negative bankroll, but in terms of what can possibly show up, it's not going to be any kind of negative roll or negative spin type deal in terms of these games. So that does affect how the numbers are distributed and the curve that we actually end up getting. Finally, the house edge. Let's assume I did not talk anybody out of believing in the law of averages. You still believe that. Then if you believe that, that alone would talk you out of gambling at all, right? Because then you believe that every possible number will show up the exact same amount of times that it should show up. With roulette, there's more numbers you're going to end up losing typically than winning, right? If every number shows up the exact same amount of times, you've lost, right? So if you do believe in the law of averages, which again is a misnomer, it does not exist, but if you believe that that's true, then you definitely should not be betting, because that means you already know you've lost the game, right? You actually want there not to be an exact amount of numbers showing up the way they should. You want to have variance, because in that case, variance is what's going to help you actually win. All right, anyway, let's start with some assumptions and parameters. First, we're going to assume that with our column or dozen bet, the payout is 2-1. I've never seen it be anything other than 2-1, but just in case, maybe there's some shady casino out there that may not pay you that. We're just going to assume that that is the case. It pays 2-1. This is going to be a 10 minimum dollar table. The maximum that's going to be allowed for the dozen column bet is going to be $500. This is going to change depending on your casino, but what does not change is that whatever maximum you happen to see for the table is not necessarily the maximum that you have for every single bet available on the table. As you get closer and closer to like the straight up bet, the maximum gets smaller and smaller, right? Because your payout gets bigger and bigger, and the casino kind of wants to control that. It helps also with these types of strategies as well, putting a table limit so you can't go on betting and raising your bet forever. Okay. So if our minimum is $10, right? So that's going to be our units. It's going to be a $10 unit, and we can go up to 500. Then we have 50 units of $10 that we are able to use. Okay. Again, with each loss, we're going to go ahead and increase our bets using the Fibonacci sequence until we reach the table limit, which in this case would be 34 units or $340, because the next step in the sequence would be 55 units or $550 going past the table limit for the dozens bet. Therefore, we only have 9 bullets or steps in the sequence before we're done and we've lost the game. If we add them all up, this gives us a bankroll total of $880 to be ready to lose, because you should be bringing money to a casino that you're ready to lose. Okay. The math. Let's start with this the principle behind this basic strategy, which is probabilities, right? Okay. So what is the probability that we are going to face 9 consecutive losses? We're going to use this formula here, and we end up with 3.29%, which seems pretty low, right? So let's talk about number theory. The best way I could describe number theory, if you've never heard of it before, is basically how do numbers work, okay? So that 3.29% probability of a loss seems really low compared to the 96.71% chance probability of a win. Let's correct some misconceptions here with these numbers. First, probability is not the same as odds when we're referring to this. When we're at that 9th spin or the 10th spin, the odds of winning is still 12 numbers out of the 38 numbers. It is not 96.71%. Okay, those are two different things. The odds of us losing are the same as the first set of spins that we've already lost. Okay, we have less numbers that can win versus all the other numbers that could make us lose. Now, when I mean that you have a 3.29% probability of losing, it does not mean through that entire play session, that's it. Okay. Another way to think about it is every 9 numbers or every 10 numbers, that 3.29 probability of loss is going to show up. So the longer you play, the more likely it is that it will show up. Okay. So put it another way, you're on the clock. Okay. You need to make sure that during your 96.7 probability of a win, you've won enough to cover the loss once that 3.29% eventually shows up. So let's start winning. All right, here we go. This is how it's going to work. I have our wins, our net profit, our percentage net return to player. So this is the percent that we're going to get back overall versus all our costs and what we've bet. Okay, what we bet, right? So the net profit versus our bet. And then the total losses if we happen to lose that bet. So let's take a look. So again, remember, it's a $10 minimum table. So we place our $10 minimum bet on our column or on our dozen. We win, we get $20. That's a net profit of $20 because we haven't lost anything, right? So we've netted $20 without any cost. That 20 divided by 10 ends up being a 200% net return to us. That's amazing. That's a wonderful payout for that bet. Great job. If we lost that bet, then we lost $10. Okay, good. Let's move on to the second step. Well, in the Fibonacci sequence, if you want to stick straight to it, you're supposed to bet whatever your starting bet is twice. Okay, so we're going to bet another $10. Again, that wins us $20. But now our net profit is just $10, not $20, right? Because the $20 win that we get in the second step has to now pay for the $10 loss. Okay, so we've only netted $10. Okay. So this is now a net return to player of 100%. Okay. We've turned a bet that's roughly a third of a chance of winning. It's actually a little less, but let's round it up to a third. And we're only getting paid even money for it. Okay. It's almost like a red and black bet, right? Or even an odd bet, or a, high number to low number bet at the outside for an inside bet. Okay, we're getting paid even money for a bet that's not even odds, not even close. Okay, but we're okay with that, right? We're going to assume that's fine. That's why we want this strategy, because hey, we still ended up winning 10 bucks. Okay, cool. If we lose it, we lose $20. The third step, we have to bet 20, right? Because in the Fibonacci sequence, we're adding the last two numbers. So 10 plus 10 makes 20. We're going to bet 20. We win 40. We're going to net $20. Okay. That's a 100% return to player for that bet, right? We bet 20 and we won 20 profit. We've risked $20 to get $20 in return. Cool. We've already accepted that in the second step. That 100% return to us is perfectly fine. We lose that bet. We now lost $40, right? We lost the 10 from the first step, the 10 for the second step, and the 20 from the third step is a total of $40 lost to us. That's okay. We're gonna bet even more to make up for that, right? We're now gonna bet $30 because 10 plus 20 is $30. If we win this bet, we win $60. That nets us $20. This is a net percentage return to us of only 66%. Okay, we were fine getting back 100% of our bet. But now are we fine just getting back 66%, right? We're risking $30 to get $20 in return. Typically in the casino, you get less back when you have a better chance of winning, right? We still have 12 numbers we're betting on versus even more numbers that we could lose to. So we don't necessarily have an advantage here. But okay, hey, we won $20. That's still better than losing it, right? Let's continue then. If we were to lose, though, that bet, now we're down $70, right? Well, let's just move on. Let's just bet more, and I'm sure we'll get that. Well, the fifth bet is now $50. We'll win 100. That nets us a $30 profit. Again, 66% net return to us, which we've already now accepted in the fourth step to be an acceptable risk, right? We're gonna risk losing $50 to only get a $30 profit in return, and we've already said we're fine with that. Fine. Step 6. We're betting $80 now, right? 30 plus 50 is 80. We're gonna win 160. This nets us $40, which is a 50% return to us in terms of profit. We're risking $80 to just win $40 profit in return. In the seventh step, it's a $130 bet. We win 260 to net us $60 profit. This now takes us from that 50% to now only 46.2% return to us as profit. In the ninth and final bullet that we have left, we have to win this, otherwise we lose our entire bankroll. That $340 bet wins us $680, a net profit of $140, which brings us down to 41.2% net profit to us. That's a terrible bet. Nowhere else in the casino will you find that low of a percentage return to player. Okay. In slots, talking Vegas, it's about 90%, right? Maybe even your local casino, maybe some indigenous casino might have it down to 70% or so, depending on what state you're in, right? How low they can go. You play Keno, we're talking about, 80, 90% return to player. Any single game on the casino floor will give you a better return to player percentage than this bet here. If we take a look and think about it as we're willing to risk our bankroll, right, our $880 to play like this, right, and to win this bet, then that $140 profit is only 15.9% now that we're willing to risk our $880 for. So why such a low net return? What's going on here? Why aren't we getting back enough money? Well, first, it's the cost of all the losses. That's going to be obvious, right? Every time we lose, we now have to bet even more to pay it back. And those losses keep adding up. It keeps taking away, eating away at our overall profit, right? The second thing is the house edge. And a lot of people don't take this into consideration of the kind of toll it actually takes on the profits that we need to be making. On the $10 dozens bet, the true odds should pay us not 2 to 1, but instead 2.16667 to 1, or $21.66. But instead, we just got paid $20. So you lost $1.66 that the casino charged you for having won that bet, right? That was their edge. That's their take for having let you make that bet and you won it. Now $1.66 is pretty low, right? That's nothing. Okay. Go ahead, casino. You can take that. I'm good. I had fun in this game. No worries. Well, once we get to $80, you should have actually won $173.34, right? If this was a fair game with no house edge, the true odds should have paid us that. But instead, we got $160, which means we now paid the casino $13.34 for that bet. At our last bullet, $340 should have actually won us $736.68. But instead, the casino only paid us $680, which means we ended up paying the casino $56.68 for having won that bet. That's huge. Is that bet worth $56.68 to us? Okay. This is the cost of increasing our bets in a game that has a 5.26% house edge. So the more we've increased our bet, the more we have to earn to pay back what we've lost. So our losses is eating away at our profits. And the house edge is taking a bigger and bigger chunk of our money. Some counter arguments, okay, as to, well, that sounds really bad, but it's still a great strategy. One is, well, the house always has a house edge in every game, so that's nothing new. True. Absolutely true. Every game you play has a negative expected value, has a house edge, you're going to be paying. It has great recovery, okay? As I mentioned earlier before, if you were to hit it, right? And again, the probability of you actually hitting it tends to be pretty good. You get full recovery, right? You get all of your bankroll back, plus you have this profit on top of that. So no hate to the influencers like the Quest Casino channel. They have like a school in Vegas that you can go to and participate. They love this. They gave it like 2 grapefruits or something. Jack Ace, he loved this as well. Gave it a really good rating. This other guy, he calls himself the Roulette Master. Never seen a strategy he doesn't seem to enjoy. They all seem to like this. Okay. So I don't blame them. No hate there. I completely understand why it seems on the surface to be such a great strategy. With such a huge probability of winning, a lot of people think, well, then it's worth it, right? Because you're gonna win enough, the idea is anyway, right, to cover the loss. All those wins are gonna pay off and we're gonna end up ahead once the loss does occur. Right, that you're gonna make up the difference in the wins. Well, let's find out if that's true. Okay, let's run a simulation here to see if that's accurate. We're going to test out 10,000 spins. Okay, it has to be a large number because we have to reduce variance. Okay, the larger the number, the more likely we are to get rid of any winning streaks or any losing streaks, right? Which a lot of people tend to confuse with whether something's a good strategy or a bad strategy, right? Like, oh, I tried it out once and I won. It must be a great strategy. This is the strategy I'm gonna use. Or I tried it out once and I lost, so it's a terrible strategy. Okay, a lot of that is just variance. We need to filter that out. So it's gonna show us exactly how these wins hold up in the long term. So here is what we came up with in our 10,000 spin simulation. This shows you on the left the geometric distribution, and on the right you see what should be our bell curve. But if you notice, it's not what we notice, what we tend to think of in terms of the bell curve, right? A lot of our wins happen on the first and second spin. Also notice, by the way, there is no end on this curve. Okay, it doesn't drop off at the 20th spin, right? So there's a point there where there's 20 spins and we did not win our column or dozen bet. And it's not showing us, but it can go on to infinity. It's just so small of a probability that it is not showing up on the graph. But there can be a 30 spins that we don't hit our dozens bet, a 40, 100 spins that we don't win our dozens bet, right? It's out there because there is no end on that side of the probability curve, okay? There is an end on our side of the probability curve in terms of the one, right? It cannot go negative, so it's all clumped up in the 1, 2, 3 spins, okay? If we take a look at all of our first spin wins, there are 996. So we won a total of $19,920. This represents a percentage of our wins as 26.5% of all of our wins came from that first spin, right? That we ended up winning. So we put our bet down on the dozen and it won right away as soon as it spun. Okay, basically that's what's happening. Okay, I'm not going to explain every single one of these. I think that first explanation is fine. You can see how it worked out in terms of our simulation. There were 106 losses out of those 10,000 spins. The total of those losses is $39,280, which represents more than our starting total, right? Of what we would end up getting of all of these wins and losses here. So in our first attempt, we had a total of 2,557 wins. That's a lot, right? That sounds great. Like we got to come out ahead. Look at all the times we won, right? A total losses of 106. The ratio is 24.12 wins for every one loss. Again, this was for this first set of 10,000 spins. It's going to change as you go on, but I want to show you all the numbers and you could try. They should get pretty close to each other if you try it on your own, okay? Our win percentage is a 96.71% and our loss percentage is 3.29%. Remember that our theoretical probability of winning was 97.75% versus 2.25% loss. Okay, sorry, correction. The win percent is 96.02% and the loss percentage is 3.98%. The original probability was 96.71% chance of winning, a probability of winning, and a probability loss of 3.29%. So we're slightly off from what the theoretical probability should be of us winning, or we would expect of us winning. Not necessarily should. It doesn't have to end up being exactly like that. Like I said, with the law of large numbers, it's not required, right, to end up being what we would the theory would expect us to end up ending up with, right? It's not required. There's no supreme being that's going to end up requiring probability to fit those numbers. Okay. Anyway, so we did end up losing a little bit more, uh, but I don't think that it necessarily entails what's going to happen next in terms of what our losses are. Okay. So out of the 10,000 spins, that again helps remove a lot of variance, but it doesn't completely get rid of all of it. Okay, there's still going to be some variance there in that 10,000. Our total wins ended up being $75,290. Our total losses $93,280, which means we ended up losing a net $17,990. If you take into account that this was 10,000 spins that we made, then approximately every spin ended up costing us $1.80. Now, within an hour, depending on how full the table is, the casino approximates that there's anywhere from 50 to 70 spins per hour. So we're going to use those numbers. So in an hour, we've lost anywhere from $90 to $126 for every hour that we play this game in this way. On average, again, considering 10,000 spins. But that's not going to be necessarily the case on a day-to-day basis or an hour-to-hour basis because of variance. But in the long term, this is what we're going to expect to see. Okay. Now, we're going to take into account there's comps, right? Some people play for comps. I don't recommend it, but that certainly reduces our cost, right? So we need to take that into consideration, assuming you believe that comps are valued as much as money. So the average bet that we tend to make hovers around the 3.17 mark, right? There's 3.17 spins that on average we tend to win, and that 3.17 tends to be on that $20 mark. So if we multiply that out, that's $63.40. The house edge, that 5.26%. Now, I hear from some sources that they don't necessarily rate you at the 5.26% house edge, but we're going to assume for now that they do. Best case scenario, that's what they rate you at. You multiply those and you're going to get about 83 cents per spin in comps. Again, in an hour, you're looking at anywhere from 50 to 70 spins. So now we're talking about $41.69 to anywhere from $58.35 in comps. So factoring that into the cost of the spin, we're now looking at it reducing the cost of the spin by almost $1 for every spin. Okay. Now, again, this is just guesswork. A lot of these numbers, don't take them, as fact, because one, we don't know when the floor is looking at you. Okay. Maybe every time they walk around, they see you on that first level bet of $10, and that's all they rate you at. Maybe they walk around and they just happen to see you, each and every time on the 7th bet in the progression. Okay. So it's completely dependent on that. And again, the casinos don't necessarily publish how they comp people. So we don't know if they're going to be using that 5.2% house edge. So all of that is up in the air. This is just to give us a rough estimation. Okay. It's also not factoring in, you tipping the dealer, any travel expenses, things like that. Okay. So let's say you didn't like that. You think that about $2, $1.80 is too high, right? Or if you factor in comps, again, assuming you think that's actual money, in terms of food and stuff like that, and hotels and the little gifts and stuff that they give you is valued to you, we now have it down at $1 per spin. You think that's too much? You think you can improve the strategy by, let's say, having more bullets, right? More chances to try to win, right? So instead of 9 bullets, you're going to have 12 bullets. So that knocks down our probability of a loss down to 1.05% versus the 3.29% we had. That sounds great, right? We're almost guaranteed then to always win in terms of our probability theory here. So the new wins now come up to $98,580. Our losses go up as well to $131,600. This is versus the original. Remember, so we're now going up almost $20,000 in wins. That sounds great. But our losses went up to almost increased by about 40,000, right? So our wins went up 20,000 and our losses went up 40,000. That's almost double the wins. Okay. So our new net loss is now $33,020. That's now $3.30 a spin is going to cost us, right? Out of those 10,000. Okay. Versus the $1.80 that it was before. So having more bullets does not make the strategy better, right? Having more steps to increase by does not improve it. Now, if we think about it, it kind of makes sense, right? On the surface, it doesn't. But if you now look back at what we had before in terms of the percentage return to player, the higher you bet, the less overall return percentage that you get back as a player. Okay, so you're getting less and less the more and more you bet. Okay, so by doing that more, of course you're going to get back less. And then once you actually lose, that hit is even harder than before. Okay, so let's look at the second alternative then. So if more bullets doesn't make it better, does less bullets cost us less then? Well, now we're going from 9 to 7. So we're aiming for only 7 consecutive losses versus 9 consecutive losses. So the probability of that happening is a 7.02% probability of a loss versus the 3.29. So again, this seems worse, right? You have a greater probability of losing. Our wins certainly went down, right? Over 10 grand to 62,180. Our losses also went down though, right? To 74,000. So that's almost a $20,000 drop in our losses. Okay. So we dropped about 10,000, right? 13,000 in our wins, but we also dropped our losses by 20,000. So even better drop in our losses versus our wins. So our net loss is now 12,070 versus the 17,990. The cost per spin has gone down to only $1.20 versus $1.80. So summary. The Fibonacci dozen, the golden entry, is among the most favorite of roulette strategies. A lot of gamblers, especially experienced gamblers, would tell you as a recommendation to not chase your losses, right? That tends to be like gambling 101, right? Don't chase your losses. This whole strategy is built around doing the opposite, right? You want to chase your losses in this strategy. That's the whole point of this strategy, is to chase your losses. It does offer great recovery and a probability for a profit. It just has a really huge cost in doing so. You have a lot of successes, right? It makes you feel like you're a winner. The problem is all those wins are really, really small, and they are not going to be sufficient to cover the eventual loss. It asks you to bet even more and more and more to get less and less in return. Okay, that's very typical of a negative progression strategy. the betting progression actually leads to a worse bet overall than all the other bets the casino is offering. Okay. This gives the house even a greater amount of your money in doing so. The probabilities favor the initial run, okay, but it hides the true risk of what actually happens in the long run. Increasing your bets makes the eventual losses cost more, right? That spin for the cost gets higher the more you bet. Conclusions, okay? If increasing the increasing risk, right, for a smaller net return and the higher cost per spin is worth it for the fun, then by all means keep doing a negative progression. It's fun. Like I said, I used to do it. That was my favorite strategy. It's very exciting. You're at the edge of your seat when you're at your last bullet, just hoping it wins. And when it does, you're like more relieved than you are excited because you had put so much money at risk. But still, it's really exciting for sure. Okay. If you tend to be somebody that's concerned with cost, if the risk to reward ratio doesn't seem quite fair or justifiable to you, if your playtime and your bankroll are an issue for you, I'd consider you not using a negative progression strategy for roulette. Okay, at least not at the high min tables. Try low min tables, use the electronic ones that are like for a quarter or a dollar. That'll help you prolong your strategy. Find a different betting strategy that does not require you to chase your losses. And maybe even a different game altogether, because roulette is not a cheap game at a 5.26% house edge. It's not cheap. And if money is a concern for you, then it's going to definitely be a problem. This is the end. So I hope you like it. Subscribe if you like. That'd be great. You don't have to. All good. Tell me what you think down below. I know it's a bit of a long video, but it gives you plenty of things to comment about. And I hope this certainly helps save you money and you find gambling and roulette or any other game more enjoyable because of it. Anyway, have a good day. Thank you. Bye.